So I'd like to introduce Keisha Humphries. She's from the Wichita CCOP Oncology Service Line Administrator, and she has an associate's degree in nursing from Sinclair College, Dayton, Ohio in 1993, a BSN in 2004 from Southwestern University, Winfield, Kansas, and in 2013 she received her Master's of Healthcare Leadership from Friends University in Wichita, Kansas. Her work in Wichita CCOP, she's been working there for 15 years, performing various duties, including patient registration, patient care, IRB, and management. She has led the transition to use the new CIRB in preparation for the NCORP grant proposal. Aside from that, I also want to let you know that Keisha is very involved in SWOG activities here. She's the liaison for the Leukemia Committee, the Audit Committee, and she's the Cancer Control Nurse Coordinator for S1013. For anyone that's interested, I think Rose mentioned it this morning in her orientation, that Keisha is also going to do a short presentation at the Program Committee on Audits, and that's 5 to 6 today. So, Keisha. And again, she's our pinch hitter, so give her a warm welcome.
Good morning. Central IRB. I was a little surprised when I had this phone call. Central IRB. IRB has always been a puzzle for me, so please bear with me when we go through these slides. Please know that Marge said if we have questions, we're going to give you an email so we can forward those questions on. I am not qualified, I will tell you firsthand, to answer those questions. I can tell you a little bit about our experience in Wichita. And actually, as of this morning, we still are not accepted to do our Central IRB. So here we go. Just wanted a little bit about the Central IRB initiative. There are 3 Central IRBs. There's an adult Central IRB, the late phase emphasis. This has been going on since 2001, and it was basically the phase 3 studies of the cooperative group. And then there's the pediatric Central IRB, who started in 2004, and they were doing phase 2 and phase 3 and the pilots through COG. And then the adult Central IRB with the early emphasis just started this year, and that's been going through the phase 0, 1, 2, and that, I believe it's been enacted for 2 months. So the goal of this whole Central IRB process is to reduce the significant local work that we all do in our own sites. IRB takes a lot of time. It's a lot of burden, unfortunately, for some. So we're trying to do this whole concept of getting a multi-site trials and still have a high level of human subject protection, which is the whole benefit of the Central IRB. And then the second benefit would be to, again, positively influence the human subject protections, the important part of IRB. So to do this, the Central IRB transition, that as of January 1st, they've changed the Central IRB to the independent model. And what the independent model is that it reviews studies before, and then the Central IRB involves the IRB of record for in all the investigators, and then the local IRB will have no oversight or no local responsibilities. I will add that our site, we are having some oversight from our IRB. I think someone had just mentioned that the way to get this through, you have to have your support of your local IRB. And we did have that for support, but we did have to come up with a way to notify them of everything we did in our site. So they may not have responsibilities, but they still may have some oversight. The Central IRB reviews the institutional's local context and the considerations before approving the new study at a site. And then the central IRB also reviews the local developed recruitment and the education materials that go along with that, and then the unanticipated problems or questions that come up. And then that includes the reporting of the concerns to the central IRB. The local context considerations are different for all of us. Each side has their own. So they consider your local population. Kansas, I'm sure, is much different than, say, New York. And then you have the confirming that any institutional requirements, there's local and state laws that are different for all of us. And then one of the parts that we really are enjoying having to look at, because we've had some concerns in our past, is that if the investigator has time, a sufficient enough time to conduct and keep track of all the studies. I know you can't see this, but this is our study card in Wichita. And we have 121 studies. That's a little daunting at times. So by looking at the central IRB expectations, we're now looking at those studies and then seeing maybe if we should have several PIs for each different, disease site. And we're looking at different sites itself, maybe Dodge City versus Wichita, and trying to make sure that we're more even. So it's been a good process for us. And then considering if we have enough adequate staff, I think that's an important, very important prospect. And then if the facility is adequate to conduct the studies, and then confirm that the boilerplate language for the consent form complies with federal regulations. I work at a Catholic hospital, so my consent has to say things regarding birth regulation that may not be in a site that's not Catholic. So now we send all of that boilerplate information in, and then they're telling us, oh, maybe we should tweak it just a little bit. And that helps both sides. Why a model change for the central IRB? Well, the rationale was the significant number of institutions who have requested a model change. And then, of course, increasing the central IRB enrollment and utilizing it for a greater benefit to society. And they positioned the CIRB well then for their AHARP accreditation. So the impact that they're expecting is hopefully it'll eliminate the facilitated review, potential for additional time-saving efforts, and that may just make us all work a little bit better. Local IRB has no review responsibilities, and then they continue the central IRB study-specific review for human protection. Why and how? So they did a pilot study. We've done those before. And the NCI wanted to learn what the impact would be on the local institution, and then the feasibility and the best practices for the central IRB operations office. So 22 sites were chosen. Do we have any of those? Did anybody here participate? Okay. They went on for 12 months, and there was a little over 1,200 facilitated reviews rolled over. They had 189 new studies that were opened, and then the NCI Office of Market Research and Evaluation surveyed, and they did a survey of the IRB staff and the research staff, and they had great results. 78% were very satisfied or extremely satisfied, and then 84% were extremely or very likely to recommend changes. So how do you enroll institutions during this transition? Well, you have to update your key personnel info, institutional primary contact, investigators, research staff, who will be completing the worksheets. And that can be timely if you have different IRBs. In Wichita, we're a creature of different sorts, I keep getting told. We have actually several sites. We have 19 sites. And then we had 2 IRBs. One IRB is non-Catholic, one is Catholic. So we had to do a lot of negotiation between the two. So sometimes just updating your personnel and your templates can be pretty time-consuming. But I think we're on the other side of that now. We just have to get that form filled out. Then you complete and submit the signed authorization agreement, and that's the form I was talking about. And it has to have the signature of your signatory official. And then they complete and you submit this via your IRB manager that's online. And then there's a annual signatory institutional worksheet about your local context, and that's where your local language goes in for your IRB consents. And then your annual participation with your principal investigator. And that tells a little bit more of how many studies you guys are following. And then they roll over the facilitated reviews, and then you have a letter from the central IRB confirming that the transition is complete and that you may begin to open studies. So after the transition, this is what it will look like to open a new study. So the cooperative group, it'll tell you what the study is, and then you'll have a signatory official who decides with the principal investigator to open the study. And then you submit the signatory institutional principal investigator form, and then you go to the approval letter from the IRB, and then the central IRB would be the IRB of record during that time. So the signatory institution investigator may then begin the research. So some frequently asked questions. I wish they had had all the ones we had listed. I think Wichita was not a favorite place for a while there at Central IRB. We called a lot. Central IRB review of the consent. We had the Central IRB reviews, and they approved the model consent as supplied by the group chair. And then the Central IRB reviews and approves the institutional boilerplate language. And then the principal investigator has the responsibility to insert the CIRB appropriate boilerplate language into the model consent. So possible and anticipated problems or serious events, the PI would then submit the form and a management plan when applicable. And then the central IRB makes determination and does the reporting when applicable. So who will review the translated consent? So if you have a translated consent, the central IRB will review it for you, and they'll approve it, but you have to submit your cover letter and the copy of the translator's certificate of accuracy before you can do that. So this is the division of responsibilities under the independent model. So the initial review, and then there's a continuing review and the amendment reviews, and they will conduct the reviews for local context considerations, and then they'll review and determine if there's unanticipated problems both locally or nationwide or trial-wide, and that's under the it's under the central IRB. And then the signatory institution, your shop, ensures the safe and appropriate conduct of the research. And then we also have to maintain our records for IRB approval per the cooperative group guidelines. So the benefits of using the central IRB there's really quite a few. The benefits of patients and research participants can make it oncology-specific. So everybody on those boards, they know what oncology is. And they dedicated a review for study participant protections, and they open the trials faster, and they aid in completing the trials faster, which is something we all want to do. And then easier to open trials for rare diseases. We're using this a lot in our shop. You know, with so many studies open, what we're hopeful is that we can know a study has been approved by central IRB, and then we'll know that we could just open that study instead of going through IRB, having this study open, and then looking for that one patient. We've used this so far 4 times. It's worked really well. So you only open the study if you get a patient there for it. The turnaround's been about 2.5 days. And so you're able to get your patient on and get them treated with something that would have taken quite a while if we hadn't used the central IRB. So the benefits for the investigators and the research staff, it eliminates the back and forth with IRB to gain a study approval. It eliminates the frequent submissions to IRB for your amendments and continuing reviews and your adverse events. And it eliminates the completing the IRB application and duplicating the IRB submission packets. And then the benefits for the IRB members is it actually saves on their time and efforts by eliminating a full board approval of the approval on some of these cooperative group trials. Our chairman of our IRB always says, the experts made this study. They did it for a reason. Let's look for it. They're really our IRB. We did not expect them to be so willing to do this, and we were surprised. They are actually thrilled. We do have to notify them. We send a form that we have created just to say what the specifics are, and then that way they have some oversight. Our hospital that we're based in wanted to know what studies were being done in their hospital, and that made perfect sense to us. So we've been working on that. And this is the information for contacting the Central IRB. So you can call the phone number, and there is limited staff working right now. They've helped us quite a bit in the last week and a half. And then there's the fax number. I understand it's not being, it's a kind of a slow process. And then there's the website, of course. All right, thank you so much.